And a one. Oh, we're live. Here we are. It's the Agile Ventures Community Talk meeting. We've got a special edition today. We've got Matt Ryder is going to be talking to us about the process of Dockerizing Website 1, which is entitled Agile Ventures Crowdsourced Learning and Software Development as Part of a Distributed Team. Matt, please take it away.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out
Hey, Matt.
to the conference. Hello. Good to see you all. So yeah, today I'm going to be talking about Agile Ventures, which I will get to in a second what that is. And the name of my talk is Crowdsourced Learning and Software Development as Part of a Distributed Team. So just to introduce myself real quick, I'm Matthew Ryder, although I go by Matt. I work in support at Agile Ventures, and I'm part of a distributed team. So I started programming about a year ago. So I'm very new at this. And I started learning alone just with courses online. The first thing I did was just like HTML and CSS stuff. And then I started with a little bit of JavaScript, and then got stuck a little bit on learning Ruby because I really like Ruby. And I'm 34 years old, and I guess I started kind of late because I guess I thought that there was too much competition, that it was going to be really difficult to get a job, that that kind of thing. And I was at a friend's house, and he was just asking why I didn't give it a try. And I said, well, I guess that's a good idea. Why not? I mean, worst thing that can happen is that I end up just doing it as a hobby. So I started and really started enjoying it. And I was taking a course in Berkeley, MOOC, which is a massive online open course. And it's called Agile Development with Ruby on Rails Basics. And I came across this great organization called Agile Ventures, which I became part of. And since then, I've become a pair programming enthusiast because, yeah, I mean, I think the experience of struggling alone, trying to learn and trying to do everything by myself, and bugging my friends who are developers to help me get through some stuff made me really become a pair program enthusiast and share that knowledge. I live in Florianopolis, which is, for those of you who are not from Brazil, is a small island in the south of Brazil. And I am vegan, and I am also a home brewer. I make my own beer at the house with my wife. So that's me. Agile Ventures. So I pasted the link to the website here, which I need to fix, but yeah, you can find it at https://agileventures.org. Not now, of course, but afterwards you can go there. And so Agile Ventures was actually born out of that MOOC that I'm talking about 6 years ago, I believe. Some of the students got together and started organizing and building stuff as part of the project for the course, because the MOOC actually doesn't have a project as part of the curriculum like the Berkeley course does. So they got together and started organizing and building stuff together. And out of that was born Agile Ventures. And so Agile Ventures, we have daily scrums, which for those of you who are not familiar with what scrums are, it is a short meeting that's normally about 15 minutes, although if I join the meeting, sometimes they go a little bit longer than that. But the daily scrum is where we answer 3 questions, like what did I do, what I will do, and if there are any blockers. As you might imagine, Agile Ventures supports an agile approach to software development. For those of you who aren't familiar with the agile approach, it's like short interactions or short cycles and many interactions with the client to show the work that's been done, and to check with the client and get the client using, and that client interaction to see where to go in the future. So Agile Ventures is an official UK charity. We have a very strong online presence. We do things remotely. and support professional development for new developers, but also for people who've been developing for a while but are switching positions or switching gears and going into a different language and that kind of stuff. And we have daily pair programming sessions that are open to anyone. So crowdsourced learning, you might have heard that term and started Googling what crowdsourced learning is. I think everyone's kind of familiar with crowdsourcing, but what is crowdsourced learning? So I wrote down a couple of words here that that describe a little bit about crowdsourced learning. So it's based on sharing experiences. That's where like two or more people attempt to learn something or to get a better understanding about something by combining to share their experiences and take on asymmetric roles. And it's like a common task that you're trying to solve or you're trying to learn or get better at. It's depends on people, the people depending on each other and being accountable to each other. And if you contrast that to competitive individualistic learning, where people are primarily concerned with how they can, what they can get out of something and achieving individualistic success, crowdsourced learning is thinking about how you can benefit, but also how the group can benefit as a whole. So it's a very learner-centered type of learning, and it involves like, or it's based on peer interaction, evaluation, and cooperation, which is one of the reasons I was really drawn towards it, is because unlike competing against other people and maybe you only succeeding if other people's fail, it's based on cooperating with each other for a common goal and reaching that together. So the software development part of Agile Ventures, we've had hundreds of open source free projects in the 5 years that they've been going strong at it. Right now we have 11 more active projects. We do have other projects that are somewhat active or not so active, but we have 11 that are the more active projects. We work in languages like Ruby on Rails, Elixir, Ethereum, Python, JavaScript, React, Ember.js, and others that I'm sure I need to write on my slides. And some of our paying customers at the moment are NHS for the HLP Wiki and the Anthony Powell Society. So the NHS, for those of you who have never heard that before, is the National Health Service. And we have a Wikipedia for their Healthy London Partnership, which promotes social prescribing, which is a way of actually taking a holistic view of medicine and getting people to understand that their health is more than just about going to doctors, but about a myriad of different things. So this is a picture of our website that we have at the moment. We work on a distributed team. I'm part of a distributed team at Agile Ventures. We have had almost 9,000 volunteers in 5 years, representing all 7 continents. And one of the things about working on a distributed team is that we have all of our meetings and our pairing sessions are recorded. So people, if they can't make the meeting, for example, they can look back on it. Or maybe they were at the meeting or they were in the pairing session, but they need to go back because they didn't think about a question, or they asked it but didn't fully understand the answer, and they want to review the code or they want to review the material. So that's we really use technology to help out with working in a distributed team, because there's not the water cooler that you can just run into your colleague and ask questions like that. We also have Slack, which helps a lot with that as well, where you can put a question there or put some doubts, and people can answer when they get a chance. So website 1 is one of the projects. And it's actually the flagship site, which can be found at agileventures.org. I already said that. And there you can find a list of projects. You can find all the events that, that Agile Ventures promotes and that the members create. And you have a list of the members as well. So anyone can create an event, provided they are signed up with Agile Ventures. Or a project. The criteria for having a project is what I mentioned earlier, that all of the projects for Agile Ventures are open source and they're also free to use. So we have a free tier membership that gives access to that Slack channel that I was talking about and Scrums. And this is the way we can support new developers, but also people who have been developing for many years, but learning a different language, or who would like to give back by helping other people answering questions or project or professional development. So we also have premium levels as well, which give access to premium mobs that we have on a daily basis, pretty much, where we pick a language that we're interested in learning and we mob on it, which is one of the great tools that we have at our disposal for crowdsourced learning, where we can switch drivers. So one person is taking the lead and doing some coding, and other people are talking about what that person is doing, and then we switch it back and forth and help each other to share knowledge. And we have lots of new developers joining every day. I'll talk a little bit later on how you can get involved. So this is a picture of our website, the homepage of our website. So I can't really interact with it, but just so you have a picture of what it looks like. So now is coming to what I really wanted to talk about on the more techie side of things, which is Dockerizing Website 1. So this my involvement with this came out of a couple different things. So I helped to support new people coming on board with Agile Ventures and to help out on this open source project, Website 1. And we had quite a lot of people who were getting stuck on getting the dependencies installed on their local computers to help out. One of them being this Capybara WebKit, which I won't go too much into what it is, but we're having some issues with people getting set up. And at the same time that this was happening, I was helping to organize this English hack night at Ruby Floripa, which is an organization that has a meetup there in Florianopolis, where I live, and that obviously focuses on learning Ruby. And so it was a desire of people to be able to practice their English and to meet with other people who were interested in tech, and to be able to learn Ruby and or share what they know about Ruby with other people. And we had not an issue, that's kind of commonplace when you have people with different operating systems. You have people who don't have the dependencies for the open source project, and it can take quite a bit of time to work with all of them to get set up the first time to start contributing to the project. So started thinking, well, that's what Docker's about, so why not Dockerize it? And that's what we started to do with a group of volunteers. So the first pairing session we had on this, we went to this Docs Docker, which they have a document, that a blog that you can read to help get you started on a Rails app. And we basically just followed that tutorial, and we were successful. We got it working locally on one computer, on one operating system. And, we're really happy about that. But at that time, we failed to test on other machines and environments, and just, wow, that was really, really simple and no problems. And everyone was happy. And then we had some questions, because another thing I forgot to mention about Agile Ventures that We support TDD and BDD, so we're constantly writing tests to help improve code and to make sure that it doesn't work in one circumstance, but in a different circumstance it doesn't work, or it works one time, but then when you try the fifth time, it doesn't work. And we had some difficulty in how do you write tests for Docker to see if it works for multiple different environments and different computers and different situations. So that was in the back of our minds as we finished this first session. And it was merged into the develop branch 2 days later, and everyone was partying and having a good time. And this is what our Docker file looked like. So I'm not sure everyone's familiarity with Docker here. Maybe people here know more about it than I do, but I'll just take a quick minute to explain. So in line 1 of this code, which hopefully people in the back, I don't know how big the conference room is, can see, we are pulling in an image from the official Ruby image for 2.5, which uses Ruby 2.5.1. And that was the first thing that we needed to do, is get a hold of the project manager and say, hey, do you mind if we bump up the Ruby version in the gem file? Because the official Ruby version uses 2.5.1. And at the time, we were using 2.5.0. And he said, yeah, that sounds good. Why not? Upgrading is always a good idea. So we went ahead and upgraded that. And from pulling in this official image from Ruby, we gain a lot from that. So we could have written all that stuff ourselves, and it would make it much longer. But instead, if it's already there, why not use it? One of the things that we pull in from that Ruby official version is we pull in the operating system, which is, I'll have to check, Debian, I believe. And that's what allows us to be able to, on line 2, run things like apt-get update. And then we have the apt-get install, where we install the build essentials, which are essential. And we pulled in Node.js, which you need for Rails. And this Qt5 default and WebKit 5 and GStreamer and all this is for the Capybara WebKit. And then what we do on line 6 is we make a directory inside of the container, which is we named website 1. And then we made that into the working directory. And we copied over the gem file and the gemfile.lock, which is where all the dependencies are stored for our Rails app. And then ran bundle install to install those dependencies inside of the container. And then on line 11, we're copying over everything into the website 1 directory. Any question? Oh yeah, I can't ask questions. Never mind. So then I think a day after it was merged in, maybe, we encountered the first bug in what we were doing. So as part of the tutorial, we were asked to go to the config database.yaml and add this host DB. It's what allows the Docker to know where to look. And yeah, that caused an issue for people wanting to develop locally. So me, for example, I like to do things locally. I don't like to use Docker for local development. I have Linux, and I am set up to work locally. And when I want to work on a new project, I get set up to work on the new project locally. So I pulled this down and I switched branches and started working on something, and realized that actually I couldn't go to localhost because I was pointing everyone to this host DB. So that was an issue that we had to get past, and I'll talk about in a minute. So then we were kind of, this was leading up to the first English Hack Night, where we were going to actually use it. And so the first part of the night was getting everyone set up, because you do have to, people do need to install Docker and Docker Compose, have those installed locally. However, that is much easier than getting people to get the right database installed and to install the dependencies and make sure they have the right Ruby version and the right, actually install a Ruby version manager. So that was pretty straightforward, getting people set up on that. And then we had realized after the first pairing session that we were able to run all the tests, but we hadn't actually installed Phantom.js, which is our driver to run our tests. So interestingly, it was intuitive enough to realize that we didn't have Phantom.js and that we needed it. And it actually installed that for us, which I found awesome that it was that intuitive. But that means that every time you run a test, it's going to install Phantom.js first. So we knew that we had to actually go back to and look at the project setup, and that we were missing some things that we would need to add to the Docker file. And one of those was this npm install. And also we needed to update the dependencies and copy them over, which I will talk about in a minute. So this is one of the changes that we made during the English Hack Night. Is we said, well, let's install npm globally and install Phantom.js globally, and then let's run npm install to install our JavaScript dependencies. And so this didn't work when it got to line 4 there. No, sorry, when it got to line 12, it was saying, sorry, line 5, it was saying that it didn't have npm installed. And couldn't find the command npm. So we had to have a bit of a research during the hack night, and we came up with this, which is to pull in the node source from curl it in, and then we would install it with the Node.js, and then that worked. So that was good. But we left that night, and it was still not working on everyone's computer. There was some issues, which I am going to add a slide to, hopefully, where it was not finding one of the JavaScript dependencies in progress. And so it wasn't actually, it was building fine. It was starting the server okay. But when a person went to visit the site, it was saying that it couldn't find this dependency in progress. So we had to do some debugging on that over the next couple of days. One of the things we did was to add the package.json, copy it over actually, and the package lock.json, which, makes sense that if you're going to npm install something that you have the dependencies that you want for your project. And then also we have there on line 19, we have the last line. Now one can see the lines from where they're sitting. The last line there, we are running this script that we have as part of the project, copy JavaScript dependencies, which you may or may not understand what does, but you might be able to take a guess. So in the following days, we were having some issues with volumes. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And we created some scripts to get it easier for people to run for the first time, get it set up and start this stuff. And we also updated the README. So this is a look at how we changed the Docker Compose file, where we added these volumes. And later on, we would notice that this was actually causing an issue that we hadn't at first noticed. So this is a copy of our what we did with the scripts. So what this does is in the top one there, we're running this Docker Compose down and removing all the images and all the volumes and all the orphans. And then we're rebuilding it, forcing it to remove any containers, and telling it not to use any caching, so it wouldn't be we wouldn't be getting any sort of false positives for people who were getting it to work, but only because they had some information stored that a new person wouldn't. And then we were running the creating the database, running the migrations, and seeding the database with the information that would allow us to be able to go and see projects, for example, or go see events, for example. And then we also had a start script, which would run Docker Compose down on the containers. So it would stop any containers that were running and would run Docker Compose up to start them again. And the stop script, which was just to stop the containers. Here's a picture of our README, which just explains to new people how to set up using the Docker scripts and what environments we tested it in. And then we came to time to put in their second PR. So unfortunately, as you might be able to tell from this extremely sad face, this crying emoji, in my haste to create an environment where people would be able to pull and push from, and we could give access to, I created the branch on English Hack Night from an existing branch instead of from the develop branch. So what happened when I put in the second PR was that it's difficult to see, but you can see at the top of this this image that we have here, there's a lot of other commits that have absolutely nothing to do with the Dockerization of Website 1. And so I needed to squash the commits. I bring this up because even though it is quite embarrassing for me, it's something that working together with many different people and different people committing, it would be nice to be able to put in the PR and have all of their work acknowledged by the commits. And in this case, I needed to squash the commits. Although I did learn how to give someone like a co-authoring credit on GitHub, but just something that I made a mental note to be more careful of, so this doesn't have to happen in the future. So that was working for people who were trying it. Everyone was happy. We had it merged in. People were starting to use it. And then we started realizing that there were some issues with Windows, which I don't have. And need to get better at being able to test things on Windows. But one of the volunteers brought it up to our attention that actually there was an issue with getting it started with Windows. And that was to do with our npm install. And so as part of the npm install, we have a post-install script, which you can see there on the bottom, or maybe you can't because it's too small, but there's a post-install script there that I talked about earlier. And what that does is copy over the JavaScript dependencies, and that was causing an issue. So here's a look at the JavaScript dependencies, where that first line there is a bash script, and because of the line endings, it was not working. And one of our volunteers said that he thought it was a DOS to Unix issue, and so went about to help us to fix that, so that people who are using Windows can actually use the Docker to develop locally. I won't really go through what this is doing, but the first one there is that end progress that we were seeing was causing an issue, and this is just copying the files over to the vendor assets JavaScripts where they live. Also, I mentioned earlier that we had some issues with volumes. So while we were debugging, or while we were contributing with a group of different people making changes, and we had added this web volume :/website1, which actually we realized that when we were using it, that when we made a change locally to something, for example, just a header of the events page, for example, that then when we refresh the page in our browser with the server running in Docker, that it wouldn't actually reflect those changes, which is a big issue. And you would need to rebuild the thing, stop the server and rebuild it for it to actually show those changes, which is just, makes developing locally with Docker kind of impossible if you need to do that every time you make any changes, and to see if those changes worked, and then you realize that you misspelled something and you have to do everything all over again. So we had an investigation into this, and we realized that that web volume should just be a dot, which tells Docker to watch everything and how it was before. But again, when you're working on a team of people, sometimes changes get made and don't realize exactly what those changes are doing, or it doesn't work in the way you thought it would. And we end up changing that back to get it to watch the local files and reflect those. So yeah, we were working for a week or two with the Docker. I was pairing with people and using it. I did note that it takes longer to do things than just doing things locally, which, you know, for me, again, it's not something I've used to develop locally. I prefer to do things locally. There was some time where we would schedule a pairing session, and then, you know, the first 15, 20, 30 minutes would be, you know, getting things started and rebuilding and doing this and doing that. And, you know, just learning actually the workflow of developing with Docker as well, and trying to get better at that, and thinking of ways of, you know, like talking to people that you're going to pair with and be like, hey, you know, do you think you can start your Docker stuff before we meet? And things like that. But it was working, and no issues, and people were able to use. And then we ran into another issue, which was that when people would pull down changes from develop, which, you know, you need to do on a regular basis, because there's always things being merged into develop that other people have done, then it started causing these rack timeout issues. Now maybe nobody here knows what that is, or maybe everyone knows what that is. I don't know. But this is what a rack timeout issue looks like, where it's saying that I'm sure you can't read there in the back, but it's saying that the request ran for longer than 15,000 milliseconds. And so people were not able to actually visit the website. And this caused quite a lot of pain on on my part, trying to, and not just mine, but other people trying to work with this. And we're trying to pair on things, and our pairing sessions were being derailed, as you can see from this this frustrated monkey. So we were spending time where we had scheduled a pairing session to contribute working on an issue, an active issue. And for the whole time, we were trying to debug what was going on with the Docker and why people were not able to pull in changes and then just go visit the site, whereas previously they had been able to. Now we went back and forth on this for a couple of days, and then someone suggested, well, why don't you explain what's happening and in like our tech talk there on Slack, and ask someone for help? Like, that's a good idea, actually. Why not? And so having done that, we came up with a solution, actually, that is maybe more of a workaround than a solution, which I guess we'll talk about here in a minute. But what we did was we added this to our env file that would set the rack timeout or service timeout to 2 billion or 200 million or some really large number of milliseconds. And having done this, we stopped seeing that error, as you might imagine, because what was happening was it was taking longer for it to load than our rack timeout was giving us. And this is something really that is used more in production than in development. So we added this as kind of a dirty fix to get people to where they could continue using the Docker for local development. So that brings me to asking some questions like, is Docker really a good option for local development? I mean, it's working right now. There are people who are using it, and it seems like the amount of time that we're spent in debugging, getting things to work is going down. There are also people are actually getting better at debugging those things themselves, I feel like. And we don't have any reported issues. But it does take longer. And there is that initial I guess just learning some different things about it that makes me wonder if it is a good option for local development and how much time we're spending on that versus other things. One of the other things that we did was I went back and revisited this whole Capybara WebKit, because up until now, most of the people, or all the people who are using this Docker instance for Website 1 are using Macs. And I said to myself, if you have a Mac computer, you should be able to just work locally, and then identified Capybara as the main culprit in people not getting past that part, who were maybe willing to have Postgres as a database set up, or who already did have it set up. And so went back to that and started poking around and noticed that WebKit is not configured to be used anywhere that I found. And so I just removed it, and as you do when you don't understand something. And that didn't seem like it had any impact on running the test or anything like that. So that's another thing. Maybe we got people to actually get set up locally to get past that bundle install by removing this Capybara WebKit, which at some point was being used and maybe is not being used anymore, or at least it doesn't seem like we've had any negative impact by removing it. So what are the next steps? Well, we're gonna have a sprint coming up in, I think, a month from now, more or less, where we're going to be able to talk at greater length about this kind of stuff and have a closer look and make sure I didn't horribly break things by removing Capybara WebKit, and just have a closer look at and maybe have a cleanup, because when you have tens or hundreds of volunteers working on a project, sometimes you use something at some point and then you stop using it and it's still left there, and you need to do that, have a look and make sure, are we actually using this anymore? And if not, then maybe get rid of it, because you slow down your builds on CI, and you slow down just development in general when you have things that you don't need that are still there as part of your project. So I want to thank everyone for listening to me for the last 15 minutes, however long it's been. I need to have a timer. And so I want to tell you about how to get involved. But I will need to do that after I finish this slide.
Well done, Matt. That was excellent. Really well done. Good stuff.
You're losing my voice.
But I have to start off by saying, like, you're a much better speaker than me. Like, I could, like, understand you. They were like, you enunciated the words. You didn't gabble. It was like, at least for me, very, very easy to understand what you were saying the whole way. I don't know how you felt about it, Federico, but yeah.
Well, yeah, bravo. I liked how you threw in jokes about, people in the back. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you guys can't read this, but
yeah. I like how I started off by pointing out the line number that I can even barely see, and expecting people to know what I'm talking about. I felt like I did talk fast, actually, especially because I think a large percentage of the people are their English is their second language, and so that I think that makes a I need to remember that and try to talk slower, maybe.
Well, I think it was okay. I don't think you were really like speeding through it or anything.
Okay.
That's my assessment, but I didn't have that in my head, that maybe you might have English as a second language speakers. So, but yeah, thinking about it, I think it was okay.
Yeah. I mean, I've taught English for a little while, so when I remember, sometimes I try to slow down my pace a little bit, but it's difficult when you're.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a good, because I listen to all my podcasts on times 2 speed, and then I know when I give talk, I can tell that as well as speaking fast, I start to mumble. is so, you know, I think you were talking reasonably fast. Personally, that's good for me. Absolutely, for people who do English as a second language, probably the slower the better. But I think you were still, even if you were talking fast, you were still enunciating clearly. Which yeah. So yeah, and I think the talk that lasted there for I think about just under 40 minutes.
Yeah.
All the way through. And yeah, so if you've got 45 and you've got room to slow down by 10% there.
Cool.
I did also take notes.
Nice.
Which are, I've got like a chunk of notes just on, there are notes about terms that and this is, I'm just guessing because it all depends on your audience. I was just going through thinking about terms that people might or might not be familiar with, and then so I mean I can paste this in so you can see my list of notes. What I would just say before I share it with you is, don't feel that you have to, like, just all the terms I've mentioned doesn't mean you have to like spend a slide explaining each of them.
Yeah,
it's just food for thought of, you know, this term, you know.
Yeah, especially if I'm looking for another 10 minutes of content, I can maybe make sure that somebody understands.
Yeah. And if you're looking for more kind of, the thing I was thinking, particularly because it sounds like the conference is going to be like a mixed technical audience, right? So there's going to be people who program in all different languages, work with all different technology stacks. Like, obviously Docker is quite big, but there's some people who may never have heard of Docker before. It might be like a completely new thing to them. Yeah. So I was thinking that since a lot of understanding the trials and tribulations, I think it's a fantastic talk from the point of view of like explaining we tried to do this thing, we had these problems, you know, the narrative, wonderful. And for people who know what Docker is, they'll immediately get that narrative. But if they're a bit, you know, if they've never heard it before, they might struggle there. So Anyway, I think I can hopefully just pass these across and not have it feel too heavily like crushing criticism, because it's not. It's a great talk, and I think it's good. There's just, you're in a particularly tricky situation, as I say, dealing, like if you knew you were speaking to a group of Ruby devs, then it would be a completely different thing versus totally technical audience.
Like bundle install, for example, like, you know, what is, people might have no idea what that is.
And almost certainly some people will not. But I think the trick that you can do there is that you've got, everybody will understand the idea that there's like, well, I mean, again, the difficult there is like, did you get a sense, is it going to be a mixed technical audience with lots and lots of experienced people, or it's kind of like going to be a big mix of like experience levels? So there's going to be some like people totally new to programming and kind of like want to hear what programming is, and then other, I mean, any sense of that either way?
No, not really. I mean, it might be something I need to reach out to the guy who's organizing the thing, because they're having a pre-event meeting or pre-event party that I would love to go to, but I'm getting there kind of like maybe in the middle of it, and then by the time I get there with public transportation and stuff, it might be towards the end. So, but it might be something I can clarify with him.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, because there, I mean, and with it unknown, I would err on the side of caution. So, for example, you might say things like, you know, so software always involves, you know, other software libraries, and then there's that dependencies of versions of that, and then you've got multiple examples. So you've got like bundle is the one managing the dependencies for the Ruby, npm for the Node, apt-get for the, you know, Linux libraries, and so on. So if you've got like a, you know, a one slide on dependency management, one slide on Docker, particularly the thing about Dockerization is the virtual machines. You can kind of be referring back to that through the talk, maybe.
Yeah, nice.
Cool. So I would pretty much agree with all that, but I would also just say that if you didn't change a thing, I think it was a home run, and I was very impressed. It was like one take. It seemed like you didn't totally screw up at any point, you know.
No. I mean, I think,
can we start over?
And that's, you know, because like I think it's like your delivery is great. You know, we can hear what you're saying. You you make little jokes. You come across as, you know, like a nice guy. You know, like doing his best against difficult circumstances, and it's like, yeah, you know, I mean, I think everybody who hears you give the talk is gonna like you and want to be involved in doing the same sort of stuff and be impressed. So it's all good. The stuff that I've just put it into there. It's all like little tweaks if you want to figure it out. But exactly as Federico says, you could go and give the talk like that, and I think you'd win a lot of fans.
The other thing that I want to change about my slides that I mentioned to you, Sam, is that so I was reading some stuff about creating slides and stuff, and they were saying to put your Twitter handle on every slide, kind of I don't know about that, but because that point, I don't know if there's even space on slides. I think some of the slides as well, maybe I can shorten the amount of text, instead of full sentences, just something going to remind me. But I was going to say I want that, if you can grab me a copy of the logo or something. I tried to copy it from the site, but then
we've got a separate repo that's full of all the logo stuff. I will find it for you and share it with you, so you can
And then I have a Twitter handle, but it's not, I don't know, my Twitter is really horrible. I was thinking just try the Agile Ventures Twitter handle.
I think you could, in terms of these general talks, you definitely have emails, Twitter handle, everything on the last slide. And when you finish the talk, the last slide just stays up there for a couple of, minutes. And so people get a chance to take that down. Yeah, it depends. I mean, you could put it on every slide. Maybe I think overall the slides are good in that the danger is that you put too much text on the slides, and so you're on the minimal side. There's always tightening up that you can do, extra this, that, and the other. And then there's a couple of places you'll see in my notes where tightening up maybe could allow you to, sometimes you were on slides and you were talking about, say, for example, Phantom.js, but Phantom.js then wasn't mentioned on the slide. And anyway, these are normal things that you'll tune up. You'll also be able to watch the video back.
Yeah, exactly.
And then actually, you'll have all of the, you'll see, all stuff. In the general talk, the thing about, I'd almost say Twitter on every slide. There's another thing that you can do that I say is good for if you're doing a talk that's 40 or 45 minutes, you can do a kind of a slide that's what's it called? Do a kind of table of contents slide that sort of overviews the sequence of what you're going to be talking about. I've done this a few. I quite like this as an approach. It fills out the slide deck. It shouldn't necessarily take more time, but you kind of have my talk, and then you have the individual things. This is intro. I mean, not intro. Actually, the real content. Content to sidebar. I don't know what these terms are, and then more content, and then conclusion. Right. So you're kind of giving people a little bit of a overview at the beginning. This is the sequence that my talk's going to take through these points, and then you can kind of have this slide appear every 3 slides or so when you move from one section to the next, and you can kind of have it so that a particular, not the whole thing, but you bold the portion that you're about to go on, so that basically every 5 minutes you're kind of taking people back to, this is the overall narrative flow of my story. Yeah, and we're now moving on to, I've just covered point 1 that I wanted to introduce you to, and now I'm moving on to point 2. This is not essential. I mean, your great delivery and natural charismatic personality kind of, I think, carries people through the whole thing. But then I'm thinking, particularly for people whose English not as strong, people who might be being distracted by another talk going on in the same room, the ability to kind of say, this is the narrative structure, that's something to consider. Anyway. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Nice.
Cool. Right. Well, I better go to supper. That's a fantastic talk. I look forward to seeing you in tomorrow's Scrum.
Yeah, we're gonna video it as well. So that'll be available for everyone's consumption as well.
And we'll have to get you some
yes
goodies.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
I got to run. Bye for now.
Cool. Thanks, Sam.
Good
luck, Matt.
Thank you.